In this edition of On the Ground, I'm speaking to Shiraz K in Louisiana in the United States. Shiraz works as a registered nurse in Louisiana. He has so for the last over 20 years. So he has a good perspective of what's happening on the ground there in the healthcare industry, how the most vulnerable will be taken care of. Louisiana is unique in the sense that it's one of the poorest regions. Louisiana and the surrounding states are the poorest region in the U.S. They have, they had Katrina and the devastating effects of that. They have another thing that's unique is the young population, under 60 years of age has a higher degree of instances of COVID-19 than in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. That has to do with socioeconomic conditions as well. A lot more of the young in the southern United States have pre-existing conditions that make them more susceptible to the virus. There's many other socioeconomic factors that are at play in the southern United States, causing almost 1/10 of the cases are happening in that region of the United States. So we delve into all of that. Also, Shiraz gives me insights to what's happening inside the hospitals and the IC units and the COVID units in the United States, in Louisiana. Especially, he also gives me some insights of how faith and religion play a factor in that part of the world, and how that is affecting the rate of instances of COVID in Louisiana as well, where churches are not shutting down and people demand their right to congregate, even though the cases and the death rate continues to climb. So Shiraz and I have a good conversation. Please listen in. It starts right after this. Thank you. I'm with my good friend, Shiraz K, who's living in Louisiana in the United States, southern United States. And I wanted to touch base with Shiraz because I want to really have an understanding of what's happening in the southern U.S. There's some unique stuff going on down there. And Shiraz, being a registered nurse, has lived in Louisiana all told for 22 years. He had a brief time back in Canada, but then went back to Louisiana, and he's down there. He's working as a nurse. So we're going to talk about faith in the southern U.S. and how that's affected during the pandemic. We'll talk about how the elderly, the poor, the young, and the most vulnerable are being affected by COVID-19. So I wanted to get Shiraz's perspective on all of that. Shiraz is on the International Space Station right now, looking down at Earth. If you look at his background, no, he's in Louisiana. Shiraz, you want to give everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm 52 years old. I'm a Canadian. Lived in Edmonton for about 15 years before I left, right after I graduated from nursing. And I've been here, I was here 20 years, and then decided to leave in 2013 with my whole family. And now, 5 years after that, in fact, I moved back, and we're all back here.
And before that, I mean, you said you're 15 years in Edmonton, but you were born in Brunei, right?
Yeah, I was born in Brunei. Yeah, I was there until I was a teenager, and then left from there, which in itself was it was a different experience. Let's put it that way. Which we'll probably get into it.
So Shiraz,
Sure.
was. We all hung out when we were younger. Shiraz was the older G that kind of showed us the ropes. He introduced me to martial arts, and my love for martial arts comes along. Shiraz has a lot to do with that, and introducing me to that, and helping me, get to my first black belt. Anyway, back in the days when we used to train in a basement in the south side of Edmonton, and I think Shiraz still does a lot of martial arts training. I haven't for years. But let's talk about the pandemic. What's going on in Louisiana, Shiraz? I mean, not just the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is now, 1.5 million cases, 90,000 deaths. Louisiana itself, 33,000 cases, almost 2,500 deaths. And it's a good comparison, right? Because Alberta and Louisiana have similar populations, 4.5 million or so. They're surprised, and you have 5 times the number of cases and 20 times the number of deaths as Alberta. Shiraz, what's going on?
I think it's the culture, man. The distrust for government is rampant, especially down here in the South. Uh, I mean, like when the stay-at-home order was issued, I mean, a lot of people didn't take that seriously. Not to say nobody did. There were a lot of people that did, but there were more people that weren't. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you heard on the news, Tony Spell, yeah, the minister that out in Central that had his big gatherings during the stay-at-home order, and what happened with that, kind of will kind of give you an idea of what people think about this whole pandemic thing. A lot of people think it's a hoax. I get that a lot, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, for example, the minister not just disobeyed the stay-at-home order once. He did it like 3 or 4 times. And bringing in busloads of people to his church and congregation. And he
Well,
just got a slap
let's
in the wrist.
yeah, let's examine that. I mean, I find that
Yeah.
everybody finds that really interesting what's happening, in terms of the faith communities in the South. And there's a pastor who almost like ran down a protester or something. Somebody was outside of his church telling people that they need to stay home, and this pastor. And by the way, this parish that this pastor represents has had 100 deaths, 100 deaths in this parish, and he's not told to lock down, and then he's trying to run down a protester. What's going on with it? So is it just that I know the distrust of government and the distrust of the law, obviously. How much of this is there's also trauma left over from Hurricane Katrina, and how poorly that was handled, how poorly the South and Louisiana in particular people were taken care of during that time? Is that part of that, or does this go way back even Jim Crow
No, I think
days? What's happening?
I'm sure Katrina had something to do with it too. But personally, I think it's very little. I mean, we're talking about an entrenched way of thinking. They don't believe anybody. Okay, and now you have you have the administration, White House, doing and saying the same things coming from Trump. So that just furthers their way of thinking. Now, I was talking about the same person that you just brought up. But to show how this whole pandemic reaction is, you had one protester, just one. He was alone. He was the Lone Ranger in all this. There was nobody with him, really. I mean, that shows you how much people believe in this, or actually respect the fact that this can and has gotten deadly. Me as a nurse, I've actually seen full hand what this can do. I work in the cath lab, and since the whole pandemic and the lockdown, we've been cath lab has been closed to all electives. So what has happened to the nurses is they've been farmed out to these COVID units, and it's terrible. You see, people on ventilators that don't make it through. Once you get on the ventilators, basically you're dead. Very few people make it through that whole ordeal. And I do my best outside to remind people the devastation of COVID-19. But I'm just one person, and just like Bennett is his name. Just like him, only one person out there protesting. And another thing too, the fellow that was the pastor that was doing all this, he got a slap in the wrist. He was, he got charged. He got charged of misdemeanor. Okay, he wasn't actually put in jail until he tried to run down this person. All right, that's how even the officials, that's how lightly they take this. I mean, when the cops are not going to arrest you for putting your parishioners in jeopardy for their lives or their health, then how are you going to enforce this? Number one, and number two, that kind of gives you the mentality of these people. You know.
So what's it about? What's it about, Shiraz? Is it about God and religion, and people just want to be able to go to church and practice their faith, or is it about money? You know what I mean? Like, is it because if people don't come to church, you don't get donations, right? Is this the prosperity gospel that we always hear about by evangelicals out of the southern U.S. of like, give me all your money so that I can buy, because God wants me to have a jet, or is
Right.
this really truly about faith?
It's about faith. I mean, don't get me wrong. That part about, you got to give me money because I'm doing God's work. God is, put me in this position to get the money. That is there. But that's just one person, right? That's just him and his, and not the congregation itself. Now, on the other hand, the congregation is a whole different story. The South, I've never seen so many churches going down the street than in the South. They're people of faith, and it's their moniker. That's a big part of their life, and that's what they show other people. If you're not a church going person, you're a heretic. You're not a good person. I got that when I was down here, because I never went to church. I never went to any religious, until maybe about 10 years ago. I adopted the Unitarian Universalist Church, which has, their principles are more in line with mine, and how I think and how I view the world. And even the fact that I'm going to a church that has a multitude of people from all walks of life, that is not really Christian, has Christian Christian roots, but not really Christian now. They were more willing to accept me as like one of them, per se. You say, yeah, well, at least you're going to church, was, a remark that was given to me. So, the whole religious and its Christian base is really big here, really big than anywhere else I've seen, really. And for them, it's a mixture of, their First Amendment rights, and God is going to protect us. I've never heard of bless your heart and I'll pray for you mentioned so many times than down here in the South.
Okay, so maybe that explains a little bit of things, is that people, are saying God will help you, God will take care of you. But what about the part of like taking care of each other that's supposed to be in faith and supposed to be in religion? I mean, I'm hearing that, the reason why it's so rampant in the nursing homes in the South is because a lot of the nursing homes, when they initially sent their cases to the hospitals, they were sent back. They were told to go back to the nursing homes because they didn't want the whole hospitals to get overrun by the elderly who were showing symptoms of COVID-19. So to me, that doesn't really align with faith, does it?
No, it doesn't. They're really helpful if you're a Christian, but if you're not, then But you just look at the whole immigration thing, and just look at the institutionalized racism that's been going on here against the blacks. Okay, yeah, sure, they were granted freedom back in Lincoln's day, but the South made sure that they knew that they were still owned in some way, some shape or form or fashion, right? So that whole distinction between, this is my tribe, that's your tribe, and I don't like your tribe because you're not like me, so I'm not going to help you. You can go to hell. You are going to hell. So that's the mentality that they have here. They're very tribal, and religion is part of it. The color of your skin is part of it. And I hate using that term, but I like to say culture, but it's not even culture, because we're all part of this culture. Whether you're black, white, Latino, whatever, you're still in this culture. but it's more like, like you're different, physically different, or, whatever. I mean, it's a black and white thing. I hate to say that, but it is. It's always been that way, right? I mean, even people that come off that claim that they're not racist have a hard time, when I start talking about, institutionalized racism and all that. They have a hard time understanding that or accepting that. It's like they go all out, cognitive dissonance, and just don't want to hear it. Whether they're afraid that it will, um, show what their true intentions are, or whatever. I don't know. They've never really told me why they do that, or maybe they just don't want to hear about it, right?
Are
There's
you
some people that
seeing
think, we're all.
some of the other states are reporting that, Latino and Black populations, there's twice as likely to uh, contract a COVID-19, and
Right.
the communities twice, some communities four times as likely. Are you seeing the same thing when you're
Yeah.
working at the hospital? Is that you're seeing an over
Yeah.
representation from those ethnic populations?
Well, they actually did a study even in Louisiana, and it was like 70% of the COVID population in the ICUs were Black or are Black, and I'm seeing that firsthand. And that is, it's real easy to make it into a racial thing, but it really isn't. It's, the disparity in the, what you call it, opportunities, as far as healthcare is concerned.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, in the South, 25%, or sorry, $25 per person is spent on healthcare in the southern United States, versus in somewhere like New York, it's $84 per person. So it's like a third of what's spent in the rest of the country on healthcare per person is spent in the US, or sorry, in the southern US. So obviously the quality of healthcare is going to be a big determinant. And then also poverty itself, right? So in populations you're talking about are probably also the ones that are below the poverty line as well.
well, there are a lot of people that are, well, the ones that are below the poverty line get some kind of healthcare. They call it Medicaid, right?
Mm.
Uh, but I mean, like you're saying, $25 to, $25 to a person in healthcare. You can only imagine what what they would call free healthcare to the, to the poor people are. It's nothing. Okay. And there's a group of people that aren't even able to get insurance. They're not making enough money to buy insurance, but they're making, you know more money than, they're over the threshold of being on Medicaid. So you got these people in limbo that have to pay out of pocket to go see a doctor. So you got those people too that, and a lot of them, it's a the population, people in that population, they're either upper lower class to lower middle class, and I mean, that's like everybody walking around, most people walking around,
There's so many
and
socioeconomic factors, I think, that affect the
right.
southern United States. The southern United States also have the highest number of their population in prison, incarcerated, right? Per capita, there's more people incarcerated in southern United States than anywhere else in the country. I'm sure that plays a large part socioeconomically as well. And the other interesting thing that I was reading that is very unique, seems to be unique to the southern states as well, is that the young people are more likely to contract COVID-19 because they have because young people are more likely to have pre
Existing.
pre-existing, sorry, thank you, pre-existing conditions, obesity, diabetes, heart and lung disease, these kinds of chronic diseases in the southern United States and anywhere else in the country as well. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was all the older people, the people that were immunocompromised. But then, towards the middle part and the end, you're seeing people as young as in their 30s coming in. And yeah, those comorbidities are the reasons for that. And it all is associated to your socioeconomic strata, right? You see a lot of you see a lot of blacks because they're poor. A lot of them coming in are, in that group. Um, and I mean, I had a conversation with somebody. They were talking about black and white. The poor white people and the poor black people. How come you don't see as many poor white people in there as opposed to, like, say, black people? I mean, and somebody piped up and said, well, also a cultural thing that, and it's men. Black men don't want to go to see a doctor. They don't. It's a cultural thing for them, and as opposed to everybody else, it's just a different mentality. And I mean, I can go on and on about and it's all caused with this whole idea of institutionalized racism, how it's put down the blacks in especially in the South. Just like how what we're dealing with in Canada with the native Aboriginals, with the institutionalized racism over there, where unbeknownst to whether it's known or unbeknownst to the policymakers, when they put out these policies, it has a ripple effect to all the people that are marginalized, like the blacks down here, and now we're seeing more immigrants in that category too, because the immigrants that are coming in are from Hispanic. They're from South America or Central America, so they're Latinos that are coming in, and they're coming in basically poor. So you're seeing that population too. As far as with the COVID virus, you see them getting affected too, because of their socioeconomic status.
So the thing that you said is interesting about black men not wanting to see doctors. So then also the numbers could be even more underreported than what they're showing. If a lot of these people that are not even going to the doctor, not getting tested, maybe not even reporting death. So are you saying that maybe the numbers could even be higher than what we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, you got to remember that a lot of people are walking around asymptomatic too.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take that into consideration. We don't know. So I mean, everything is a gray area right now. So
What's the overall? I mean, I know you said there's a distrust of government and authority, but what's the overall feeling, or what's your opinion of how government has stepped up in terms of providing financial supports, both the state authorities and the federal, for Louisiana? Is there any financial supports other than, the $1,300 one-time check that I keep hearing about, but anything else in particular for the most vulnerable?
It's $1,200.
Sorry, $1,200.
It's not 13. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen mine yet. Anyways, which it doesn't matter. I would say the federal government has given very little support. They've, like Trump has said, he's expecting the individual states to take on that responsibility, where he's missing the whole picture. That's the responsibility of the federal government to help out the states. It's the other way around, So no, we're not getting any help from the federal government. As far as state-wise, the governor, John Edward Bell, has done tremendous work, in trying to control the spread of the COVID virus. He instituted the stay at home, although he could have gone, a couple of steps further and instituted where, people would get fined or sent to jail, or, well, at least fined. You can't send them to jail, because then, you're just increasing the population in the jail system, where it's now being, people are starting to see the virus going rampant in. It's just, apart from that, taking that step forward, they've done really well. I'm really, proud of what, the governor of Louisiana has done as far as trying to take care of the people and control the, spread of the virus. They're doing their best, put it that way.
And what is the situation in terms of lockdown? Are the lockdown restrictions being eased up? Was there even a strict lockdown to begin with?
Uh, there was a lockdown. Well, not say lockdown. It was, they called it a stay-at-home order,
Hmm.
where there was, limits to outdoor gatherings, and only essential people allowed to go to work and be out and about. Uh, it has since been laxed. They've taken off they call it a modified stay-at-home lockdown, or anyways. There are certain places that are now opening up, and this happened just this Friday, where the whole stay-at-home order has been relaxed a little bit, so people could go out and you know go back to their old jobs and this, that, and the other. Although there's still limits on how many people can congregate in a closed setting, and like restaurants, for example, they've all moved to the outside with 6 feet apart, to where it's out in the open air, and you got less chances of getting a full viral load that would make you sick. Uh, but as far as, like I was saying, the guy, the pastor that brought all his congregants by the busloads, he got a slap in the wrist. I know, I've heard of some places. I think it was even in Alberta, where somebody got fined for keeping their restaurant open or something like that.
Hmm.
That's what I've read. Enormous amounts of money. They don't do it here. It's like a misdemeanor, and you go home. You don't even spend time in jail for that. You don't get placed in a holding cell or whatever. To sit and think about what you did. Not any. So it's taken lightly. Um, I was out and about on Friday because I had to go pick up some equipment, and I was masked. I owe it to the people to be masked, because I've been exposed to COVID. I'm not sick from it, but I've been exposed to the fact that I worked with patients that were had COVID virus, COVID-19, who were on the ventilator, who were on nebulizers, who were on vapotherms, where everything's spewing all over the place. These aerosols are all over the place in the room and in a closed environment. But I was also protected, with N95 mask and gowns, and so I owe it to the public to be vigilant in how I present myself. So I always go out with a mask on, But there were a lot of people that didn't have masks, and a lot of people weren't following this 6 feet apart, precaution. More so when we were on, when we had that stay-at-home order. Now you got, all of a sudden the traffic's gotten worse. Just like that, everybody's out and about.
How is the healthcare
And that's
system?
a scary part.
How is the healthcare system coping? Are you from the healthcare officials like yourself, who or healthcare administrators like yourself, who from PPE standpoint, professional protective equipment, personal protective equipment, is there enough, or is there shortages? Is there enough ventilators? What are capacities at? And also from the patient's point of view, is how is the healthcare holding up?
From the perspective of PPEs, it's not the greatest. We've never run out, but that's because we use one N95 mask the whole shift. I use it a shift. I throw mine away and pick up when I go back to work. But there are a lot of people that don't. They keep it for the next day. We're using gloves over and over again. We'll go in with a set of gloves, and we do the hand sanitizer and put another set of gloves over. But the set of gloves that are inside underneath, we keep it on throughout the whole shift. We walk around with cloth gowns going between rooms and rooms. That's a big no-no. But I guess because of the shortage, I mean, we'd rather do that than, totally run out of any kind of equipment, PPE equipment, which I personally have not experienced. Although, the N95s, I mean, in the stores, they were out like within, first couple of days. The hospitals seemed to be holding up pretty well. And a lot of it was because they took, immediate action in limiting the amount of PPEs right off the bat, and only having it in the ICUs where it was really needed. So, what was your other questions again?
However, from the patient's perspective, intake,
Right.
is there
The
limitations,
intake,
is capacity?
right. Capacity. Well, I mean, the state has done a good job in flattening out the curve. That's for sure. We're coming out of full capacity. Either patients are getting better, or more so they're expiring. So we were in the hospital. Hospital I work at, we started out when all this happened at max 5 COVID ICUs going at the same time. We are now down to 1, which is good. Well, one and a half, I should say. So and it's trending down that way, which is good. So if there is a second wave or a third wave, or a second wave, we'll be able to cope with it, which I'm sure is going to happen. Just given the the attitudes people have with distancing, and most importantly, masking up. I was having a discussion, talk with one of my coworkers yesterday, and I mean, she came right out and said, I mean, this pandemic has shown me how selfish people are. I wear a regular surgical mask when I go out to prevent others from getting sick, not the other way around. Okay? But there are other people out there that don't wear masks, who are contaminating everybody, even the ones that are wearing surgical masks, because it's not N95. And there are more people like that, especially now since everything's opened up. More people like that now than there is people that wear masks that are following precautions. So, as far as the outlook's concerned, there is going to be a second wave, and the way people are moving around right now, I'm hoping that it doesn't get as bigger than or as big as the first wave, but I have a feeling it's going to hit Louisiana hard. I mean, just looking at recent history with the other countries, there's always been a second wave that's come through, and even with countries that have had really strict, lockdown, isolation precautions, and this, that, and like Singapore, they were able to control the spread of the virus very well. It didn't spread well. It didn't spread much the first wave, but now they're getting a second wave. Just a couple of weeks ago, I believe, what I read. So I'm sure we're gonna get one. It's like almost, it's not if we're gonna get one. It's like, when are we gonna get one? It could be the next 2 weeks. That's how long it takes to incubate, right? So,
How much of it is though, because I mean, like we talked about before, I mean, you're, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, like these are some of the poorest states in the country, right? So what about access? Do people have access to masks and hand sanitizer and all these things? I mean, these things cost money. These things cost money.
Yeah.
Is the public authorities providing these things for people? I mean,
No.
Are the retailers providing these things for people? I mean, you're not going to,
No.
if you're poverty stricken, you're not going to go out and buy masks and hand sanitizer.
Exactly. No, you're not. You can make your own mask, for whatever it's worth, but still, even making your own mask, and there are a lot of people that do that, that have done that, it protects others from you, but not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So this whole, herd mentality, if you want to put it, is totally destroyed when one person is not wearing a mask. So if we all protect each other, then everybody's protected. Um, but if if you don't, then nobody's protected. And as far as N95s out in the field, I mean, out like in like out and about. I mean, we still don't have N95s. You can go to any store and you won't find N95s. There's a shortage of them for sure. Uh, so as far as yeah, you're right. The people, it's not being given out. In that sense, the government is not doing anything at all. But that's typical for the United States, right? We're not living in Canada. Canadians are a little different. We tend to be more altruistic, believe it or not, even in Alberta. But down here, it's every person for themselves. Yeah, I think that because of that mentality and the tribalness, everybody's like, they don't give a shit. And the fact that the government's trying to take away their First Amendment right, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to do whatever I want.
Well, with poverty also comes, can come low literacy rates and difficulties with education and educating people as well. So, but I mean, people must generally have an idea of how, poorly it's being controlled in the U.S. overall. The U.S. 90,000 deaths. I mean, you're probably going to hit 100,000 deaths for sure. So does that not concern people, or is it always like it can't happen to me kind of mentality, or is it? You also mentioned before, God will protect us and take care of us, and if it's meant to be, then it's meant to be kind of a mentality as well. But is there just not an overall concern or awareness of how bad it is?
There's a lot of misinformation going around too about this whole coronavirus from people that have told me about what other people have said about the spread, about it being a hoax, about wearing masks, that it just increases your chances of getting coronavirus. It's just amazing how people and I think it's just it's cognitive dissonance. All this is going against their belief system. So they just shut down. So you can't talk any sense to them. No matter what you say, they're going to shut you down right away because they don't believe you. They believe in their belief is their belief, and their belief is right. And it goes the same with, you can tie that in with, the whole push to, bring, religion into the government. I mean, it's just incredible how much, religiosity has seeped into the government itself, especially down here in the South. When clearly the founding fathers didn't want that. They wanted separation of, state and church. But that hasn't happened here, really. I mean, so that coupled with, not believing what's going on, getting the wrong information, cognitive dissonance, it plays a part in how people react to what's going on around, and what their actions are going to be, right? If they don't believe it, they're not going to do it. I mean, it's obvious just walking around outside, Walmart, people with no masks and people invading space that they shouldn't be invading. Everybody's proud that the curve is down, but they don't understand. Just as well as the curve can go down, the curve can shoot back up again. And
what about the
economy? I don't know. I mean,
what about the economy? So, I mean, obviously, post Katrina, Louisiana was devastated. And so, what was happening pre-pandemic? Was there recovery happening in terms of the local economy? Has this now devastated any chance of recovery? What are people's feelings overall about jobs and the economy?
Well, that's a double-edged sword with the maintaining the stay-at-home order and the economy. Obviously, there's been protests all around the United States with going back to work, and there's protests here too. And I mean, I see their point because they're suffering. They don't have money, right? I mean, they've and you're in the United States, you don't get any help, no welfare help here. Okay, unless you're really, really down, unless you're like poverty level where you can get like food stamps and this, that, and the other. But what does food stamps do for you? Really nothing. I mean, it's a supplement. It's not meant to sustain you. So these people are having a hard time because they depend on their jobs, and now 6 weeks, 7 weeks out, without work, they can't pay for stuff, right? They can't pay their loans, they can't pay mortgages, and they're on their own. So I can understand their fear of not being able to work. But like I said, I mean, this can be rolled out in a different way. I still think it's too early for them to, relax it, but don't have a choice really, because people are starved. I mean, they're running out of money. And as far as Katrina, I mean, Katrina really affected New Orleans big time. Didn't affect Baton Rouge that much at all, as far as the economy was concerned. What it affected was the house prices went up. That's for sure, because there was an influx of people coming in after Katrina, post Katrina, and it's never went away, which is good and bad, I guess. It's good if you're selling a house, and it's bad if you're trying to buy a house. Whether it's to the extent of Katrina, post Katrina, economically, time will tell. It's really hard to tell right now. I can't really tell because they really haven't gone into that, I don't think, in the news so much about what's going on with the economy, how people are doing in that sense, because everything's been, the media has been, reporting everything about COVID. So that's been the mainstay in the news media, besides shootings and stuff. But time will tell. We'll see what happens. Like anything else, you got to sit, see, and wait. You have to watch and wait and see what happens. It's really difficult to tell who's in dire need right now until you start going back to work and people start living a normal life, and then we'll be able to tell.
So you mentioned the one person who said that they were now really cognizant of how selfish people are. What are some of the other things that people are seeing that the pandemic has brought to light? What are some of the things people would like to see change, things that are already happening for changing how people deal with each other, how, the society is taking care of its most vulnerable? Is there talk about changing? Is there talk about, things being done differently as things return to a new normal?
There's hope. There's been talk of hope that maybe, we can go, maybe healthcare will head off in a different direction, more like, the rest of the world, universal healthcare. There's been talk and hope of that. But I don't think that will happen, because that would mean, more money getting taken away from paychecks, and people just don't like that. They don't like giving money away to the government. That's for sure. They like to hold on to that. So,
if you don't trust the government, it's hard to give them more.
Exactly. Money, right.
So.
And so I don't see it changing too much.
What about voting? Do you think this will affect how people vote? You got an election coming up.
It'll affect how people get to vote. With this whole isolation thing, because if you go to any voting poll, you'll see it's like it's a herd of people, all close, real close to each other. So, there's been talk about, using, being able to email in your stuff, email in your vote, I think.
Well, mail-in vote,
but of course, mail-in voters, right?
Yeah, mail-in vote. California has done a statewide mail-in vote. Right. A lot of the states do have either statewide or some counties have had mail-in vote before. What's the case in Louisiana?
It's not going to go very well, because although it's a Democratic governor, it's still very, the people here are more Republicans than the other Democrats. So they're very conservative. And as far as all that's concerned, they have this notion that if they try something different, there's going to be there'll be a whole bunch of people there's going to be voter fraud. That's what their biggest fear is. I mean, yeah, there's going to be good and bad in every single one, every system, but there's going to be more good than bad. But people don't see it that way. They automatically jump, conclusion that it's not going to work. It's just going to mess up the system. And it's funny. People don't like change here.
Well, it's not that. It's just not that. It's what they're told as well, right? They're
told that too.
They're told that nothing is more secure than in-person polling booth, which actually nothing could be further from the truth. It's much easier to rig in-person polling booths and mail-in votes than it would be to rig online. And the way that I put it to people all the time is that if you can, transfer your money securely online and you don't have to worry, or even, government, you're entering your government your personal information into social media sites and government sites all the time, and there's no risk or very little risk. So I find it really hard to believe that it's so insecure to do or unsecure to do online voting, right? Is what everybody's told, is that online voting can't be done because it's too susceptible to fraud.
Right, and I've heard that it's a ploy by the Republicans because there's a large contingent of voters that will be affected by this.
And, well, no, obviously, I mean,
Republicans have always.
The problem with online voting and why you see it in more progressive countries is because it definitely favors the people who are suppressed usually for voting, right? Is because voting isn't a holiday, it isn't mandatory, you aren't given paid to leave to go vote, then that affects obviously the most vulnerable, right? So if you institute online voting, that makes an equal playing field for everybody, and everybody can vote. Right. And then that obviously is a problem for your government. Right. If the progressive base, if people of color, of people lower in the socioeconomic strata don't vote for you, that's going to be a problem for you.
Right. I mean, most people that fall into that category would probably vote Democrat. And that's why there's a big suppression for any kind of, voting apart from showing up and doing it like on the spot, has always been like a contention with the Republicans.
Well, isn't your president on record saying that he doesn't want to do mail-in voting because he knows it doesn't favor?
Is he? I don't know. Hang on a second. He's not my president. Remember, I'm still Canadian. Yeah, I think he said that. I don't know. I mean, I don't really listen to him too much. He just aggravates the shit out of me. So, I just turn him off. It's better that way. It's better for me anyways.
It's been great talking to you, Shiraz, and thank you for taking the time. It's great to hear what an essential worker on the front lines is experiencing and your perspective. You want to leave us with, what do you want to see? What would you like to see change? You've been in Louisiana long enough, I think, to weigh in on this. You've been there over 20 years all told. So what would you like to see happen in Louisiana post-pandemic? What are some of the things that you see that have happened or that have been put in place for the pandemic that you would like to see continue, and some other things that you would like to see put into place after things ease up a bit?
What I'd like to see is, more funding to healthcare. I mean, not healthcare. Well, healthcare, yeah, universal healthcare down those lines. Also, more funding into mental health. Me personally, bouncing between days and nights, working in the COVID unit and having to fulfill obligations in the cath lab during the daytime has really worn me down. A lot of nurses feel that way, seeing a lot of death in the COVID units, more so than I've seen, like, in the past 5 years, all in one time. That plays heavily on your mind. A a lot of people are tired. The frontliners are tired, and and I don't think we're gonna get any help as far as that's concerned. And that's where addiction comes into play, and that's where suicide rates go up. I mean, it's already started where frontliners are committing suicide. Doctors are committing suicide because they just can't take it anymore, and that will become a reality. And if the government doesn't do something about that, we're going to lose our frontline people too. And who's going to take care of the patients then? So, but I'm not optimistic at all with things that can change out of this whole thing. I mean, like anything else, like Katrina, like the flood in 2016 that devastated Baton Rouge, nothing really has changed. Just continue on as with life. It has to start up from the top, and we just got the wrong people up there, definitely. And there's a lot of apathetic, when it comes to them too. I mean, I keep telling people, you voted those people in. You can vote them out and vote somebody else in, that will do the job. But they don't even trust the people that they're voting in because, they say one thing and then do something else. That has been the trend, with people getting voted in the United States. Oh, so it seems.
Well, actually, you kind of hit the nail on the head. So, they would have you believe that people of color and poor people don't vote because of apathy, but that's not what the research shows. Recent research shows that the reason why they don't vote is because they don't feel like any of the party or any of the people will make their lot in life any better. They don't feel like one person or one party is any better, and at the end of the day, they don't feel like anybody in government cares about them. So it's not apathy; it's a feeling of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Hopelessness. It's a matter of it doesn't matter. Right. These people don't represent me. They don't understand me. They don't know my difficulties, and none of them are going to represent me or change anything. Right?
Yeah. This whole. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we can go into with the sense of hopelessness. A lot of these minorities and a lot of blacks, and even the our Native Americans in Canada. The sense of hopelessness can be really devastating on a group of people, and that's what we see down here. It's the same thing. We're all humans, right? This sense of hopelessness, where no matter what I do, I'll never get very far in life. That's why you see a lot of that coupled with racism. You see a lot of blacks in jail. A lot of minorities in jail because of a sense of hopelessness. They don't know what else to do so they'll do anything basically, whether it's legal or not, right? But that's a whole different conversation.
Well, those are multiplying factors, right? Your poverty, makes you more susceptible to, crime, because you have to do whatever you have to do to survive. And then you have a system
mental disorders and stuff like that.
Mental disorders,
too, so,
addictions, right? And your lot in life is a determinant of that. Your education, your ability to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which is what the American dream sells you, right? So what about that, Shiraz? Like, you've been there again long enough to know this. Like, what is all of this infatuation with the American dream and this feeling that, even though you were born with zero of the advantages, that the people that are held up as the proof that the American dream works, that people still believe this. They have this idea that if they just work hard enough and they just, focus on success and capitalism and taking advantage of capitalism, that they could become millionaires and billionaires just like Donald Trump and his ilk.
A lot of it is probably propaganda from what the top has been giving us, right? That's part of it. I think, this is my personal thought, a big part of it is, look at your majority, white privilege. A lot of it is probably white privilege. I mean, I see it at work. I have one guy that I talk to, although I don't like talking to him. He's your typical Southern Southerner in the way he thinks. I did this, I made these choices, I made those choices. I pulled myself out of this, I pulled myself out of that, and this is where I'm at. I didn't go. I had the opportunity to go down that road, blah blah blah, on and on. I could have become a drug addict, but I did. I did it by myself. I did it on my own. But people like that don't realize, and you start talking about white privilege, well, the conversation doesn't end very well because he doesn't believe in it. Uh, you can give him all kinds of examples, and he won't believe it. He doesn't see it. So you get a lot of people that think that way. And so this whole, although, the, American society is falling apart as far as, your disparity between the rich and the poor. People with privilege don't see it. That's how I feel about it. They just don't see it. And, everybody's, nobody wants to help each other out. I mean, obviously, universal healthcare helps everybody out. But, I'm not going to pay money so some good-for-nothing person sitting on his ass on welfare will get free healthcare. Or I'm not going to give any money because I'm young. I'm not going to need healthcare. And I've always said to them, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you better start pulling up your weakest link. But
Yeah, that's what people don't
they're
understand,
so
right? And you would think that the pandemic would bring this to light, right? Is that a poor healthcare system is also high risk. It doesn't matter what position you're in, because if everyone else is sick, it doesn't matter how great your healthcare is and how much privilege you have, because you're going to get it eventually, because they're, unless you lock yourself up in your mansion and don't come in contact with anyone, but everybody, you rely on for your lifestyle can make you sick.
Right. And it's just, it's coming from the top too. The people at the top, and obviously, person in the White House right now perpetuates the way, that way of thinking. Unfortunately, I mean, I've been told that his supporters are a minority, but they're obviously the loudest in all this, and there's a large swath of people in mid United States that are his supporters, and your blue collar workers especially.
Oh yeah, because he's convinced them. He's convinced them through his rhetoric of draining the swamp and etc. that he has their best interest in mind. I mean, I've never seen anybody who was born in privilege, born to a multimillionaire family and became a billionaire himself, being able to convince people of the working class that he was one of them and had their best interests in mind. So that's the power of what President Trump has accomplished. But I mean, one of the things that's astonishing, obviously, to see for outsiders like us is just, it's not like there wasn't choices, right? I mean, Bernie was, a choice that everybody had that could have supported some of the things that people want to see. And, 2 times now you've had a chance to make him the Democratic candidate. The more progressives you think would have recognized that. But once again, you ended up with an establishment candidate who's, it's not like Joe Biden hasn't already shown his colors in terms of what he's going to do for the most vulnerable population. So it's astonishing to see from outsiders of this sort of inability for Americans, and trust me, I mean, don't get me started on Canadian politics as well, but for Americans to see, or not to be able to see that, who at least, I mean, trust or not trust, but at least who at least could, be interested in helping the most vulnerable of American society.
I know. It's entrenched in culture is all I can say. Propaganda from the 50s. Look at how powerful the NRA has become. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was just pure propaganda from the 50s all the way to what they are now. So, I mean, it's just propaganda. Being told that you're the best. I mean, and if you can ask any American, whether they're rich or they're poor, they still think America is the best in the world. At one time, yeah, but now I don't know, man.
I mean, there's
You know,
um, lots of stuff being written about how, actually, the US could be held up as a failed state in terms of just how they're taking care of people in this during
right,
this pandemic, in terms of, are you not a failed state if, you can't take care of your population during a pandemic, if you don't have a healthcare system that's capable of taking care of people, if you don't have social constructs that are in place to take care of, when you're the richest, most highly resourced country in the world, are you not a failed state when, at times of crisis, you can't take care of your people?
right. I mean, it's a complicated issue, man. I only know bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure it's got a lot of. I mean, it's generational, and it's an American thing. It's an American history thing, right?
Mhm.
Their perception of themselves, and where they want to go and where they're actually going. So I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have to trace it back. I mean, even the origins of the US, Civil War and, settlers and, I mean, individualism, that all comes from that. And the American dream all comes from that, right? Is this, if you
Right.
didn't look after yourself, you wouldn't have gotten through, settling in the West, settling in the US, and then you got slavery on top of that. Then you've got Civil War on top of that. You've got the fact that, the country, pretty much has been at war, externally with other countries and for all of its existence. You've got a military industrial complex, you've got a prison industrial complex, you've got, rampant capitalism, you've got, rampant consumerism, right? All of these things contribute, I think, to all of the issues that have come to light now under COVID-19.
Well, under Trump, for sure. I mean, as speaking from an outside point of view, I mean,
I don't know if you can lay
I
it
mean
all
when
on
he,
Trump, though, Shiraz. Can you lay it all on
I mean,
Trump?
no,
Like, show me.
no. I'm
Yeah,
just talking about what I mean. Trump is Trump, right? We all knew what his personality was,
yeah.
but the fact that
Trump hasn't brought any flaws or character to light that we didn't all know. I've said more
already
than
know,
once.
right?
You know this, Shiraz. When we were growing up, Trump was the man. We all, looked at him as like an example of success, and what an amazing,
Money and
multi-millionaire,
women, yeah,
money, women, globe-trotting jet setter
right.
that we all wanted to be like, right? So we have a hand in creating that Frankenstein's monster.
But what I was trying to get at was, the fact that Trump is in power, that has brought light to what really what Americans are. You know, uh, Trump is just well, Trump is just the tip of the iceberg when he compares to the rest of of America. All right,
No,
anywhere
Trump
else,
Trump
a
is the
man like
outcome. Trump is the outcome.
all
Trump
right,
is the product. Trump is the result.
right result, right? Because anywhere else, Trump would not have won. You know,
Well, I mean, other
but
countries also have their mini Trumps,
oh,
but
I'm not. Yeah, well, yeah, but still, I mean,
but all those countries have something in
Trudeau,
common. All those countries
right?
that have elected a mini Trump, as much as we look down at, and there's a lot to be criticized and about authoritarian figures around the world, but in terms of the West, both Europe and North America, and um, our heads of states that we've elected from the far right, or from um, our version of authoritarian figures as well, also come from similar reasons of why Trump ended up being president of the U.S.
Well, especially in Alberta.
Yeah, you could. Well, I mean, Shiraz, you got to know. I mean, because we share, the border with a lot of U.S. politics seep into Canada, right? A lot of the things that you hear from people, is because of what they think that is happening in Canada, but it's actually stuff that's happening in the U.S., right? In terms of like,
Right.
even like, you talk about Second Amendment rights and, these kinds of things, right? Like, you would think that we had some sort of, rampant, you know, concerns for needing for people to be armed, uh, for private citizens to be armed and having long guns and, military grade weapons in Canada, and we don't, but it's things that people hear in the U.S. from the U.S., right? And same with in terms of corruption and things that are happening in terms of government as well. Is like, it's a lot of the stuff is seeping over from U.S. politics.
Right.
Not that we don't have our problems here, because we definitely do. Because I mean, the issue is that also politicians here have taken on U.S. style of politicking as well, right? They've taken on the divisiveness. They've taken on, the approach to politics that were usually tactics that were used in the U.S. are now being used by politicians and wannabe politicians in Canada as well.
Yeah,
because they've shown to work.
Oh, that. Yeah, I saw that when I got back in. When I got back to Canada, how things were changing a little bit, but I was just holding on to hope that it didn't change too much. But we'll see. Time will tell. I just hope it. I just hope it doesn't seep in insidiously, and Canada become part of the United States. That would be really bad.
Well, there's no one on the horizon, but we had, you had your George W. Bush, and then we had Harper, then you had Barack Obama, and then we got Trudeau. So now you got Trump. So who knows what's coming our way?
Who knows what's coming? Yeah.
Anyway, Shiraz, thanks so much, man, for talking with me and giving me some insight into what's happening in Louisiana and that region. Really good. Keep doing the work you're doing and taking care of people, and thank you for that. And I know that nursing was a calling for you more than anything, and thank you for continuing that. I know it can't be easy, like you said, to see all the sick and the death, and take care of yourself as well. Take care of your mental state. Yeah, let's hope and keep that hope alive for true change that coming for not just the southern United States, but the whole country and the world too. We need to make some change. Just to all of us need to make some changes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Okay, we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. Bye.